Welcome to the Nursing Post podcast, All Nursing All the Time, with Ashley Moore and Rosa Horsley. In this episode, we discuss Reye syndrome. Our goal is always to inform and spark conversation.
Yes. So this is kind of, I guess, an old syndrome in my eyes. It's not something that we hear a lot of anymore, which is a great thing.
Yes. If you're a new parent, I think this is the time where you would hear it the most. Like
Yeah.
if you're a new parent and your child is ill, or how they tell you to pre-medicate them before
Mhm.
they get vaccinations to
Right.
kind of like make the fever not so bad and this, that, and the third. I think if you're in that aspect of your life where you're raising children, like this is when it becomes familiar to you, or if you're a nurse.
And I think that just as to group that together, it's one of those things that, to me, I'm like, of course, I know about Reye syndrome and I know, what you should and shouldn't do, but a lot of new parents don't. There's a lot of like what we would consider basic, like, oh, yeah, that's 101. Everybody knows not to do that and they don't. One of those things being, and I know it's completely off topic, but I saw somebody talking about putting sunscreen on an infant. I'm like, you don't put sunscreen on an infant, that you don't put sunscreen on a baby under 6 months old. Like that's
Mhm.
their skin is not built for that. So it's like, "What do you do?" "Don't put them in the
Put
sun.
them in the sun.
Don't put them in the sun." So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of those things that some things come across as very like, "Oh, of course," but it's not that way for everybody. So just to get in a little bit of what Reye syndrome is, it is a syndrome that can occur for children at any age from 0 to 18. It's not just younger kids, it can affect teenagers. But it is a rare disease that can affect all organs of the body. Specifically, does a lot of damage with the brain and the liver, and
Mhm.
it is caused by ingestion of aspirin along with a viral illness, and usually that is the flu or chickenpox. Those are the two big ones that can really cause it, but they are not the only viruses that is associated with Reye syndrome. They're just the most common.
Correct.
So,
Correct. So we have statistics, as we always do. I'm a numbers girl. I love
mhm.
numbers. I can tell you the percent off of any clearance.
And
So
I appreciate that.
I love my numbers.
Mhm.
The incidence of this disorder, it really has dramatically declined in the
Mhm.
United States. And
Yeah.
I think that started in the late 1980s. I know
Mhm.
before then, aspirin is what your doctor prescribed for everything.
Yes.
And so I think that is probably why it was so common before the 1980s, because
Mhm.
how many times, I know I'm telling my age, but I'm old enough to remember take two aspirin and call me in the morning.
Yeah.
Like those were legit taglines on
Mhm.
commercials. Take two aspirins,
Right.
call me in the morning.
Mhm.
So approximately 200 to 500 cases were reported each year in the United States from 1974 to 1984. And since 1988, fewer than 20 cases have been reported annually. And since 1994, there's only been two cases in the United States. And data from the CDC between 1980 and 1997 found that the cases of this syndrome were followed by, like Ashley said, a flu virus, chickenpox virus,
Mhm.
and even, a gastro or GI,
Yeah.
virus. So it was aspirin itself was detected in 82% of these cases. So that was their common denominator, was the chemical compound of aspirin.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's the Journal of Pediatrics did like a 50-year follow-up of Reye syndrome this year.
Mhm.
And they were talking about there are still skeptics out there who say that aspirin had nothing to do with it. And I'm just like, the dramatic decrease in Reye syndrome once pediatricians started advising against the use of aspirin, it dropped so dramatically to say that, you know, coincidences like that just don't happen. And aspirin was first introduced in 1899. So you have to think from 1899 all the way up to the 1980s, people were
That's what we were
administered,
pushing.
a lot of aspirin. So people were like, "Oh, there were millions of kids who had aspirin and they didn't have a problem." We're like, "Yeah, but there's
There
still
were
a
so
huge
many that
number
did.
of children that were affected that it still
Exactly.
is important to, use Tylenol instead." There's a simple solution to that, and that's, a lot of times what they do, tell you to use Tylenol, acetaminophen, ibuprofen, Motrin, whatever,
Mhm.
in place of those medicines, in place of aspirin. So I thought it was interesting to hear that, 50 years later, looking back to say there are still skeptics. And, I guess there's always going to be skeptics everywhere you
But I
go
think
with
that's
everything.
why I love the numbers and
Yeah.
statistics because the math is math.
Yeah.
When 1 plus 1 equals 2, if you know a different way in which it doesn't, then share it with us. I like a good conspiracy theory like anyone else. However,
Yeah.
when you have facts backing it and data backing it, and 1 plus 1 does equal 2, sometimes you just need to say, like, well, crap, it does equal 2, and then just move on to the next thing.
It's true. That's very true. So we don't really know the exact mechanism behind Reye syndrome. We still really don't. We know that a lot of children started having symptoms of Reye syndrome 3 to 5 days after they were taking their aspirin, and once they were kind of in the recovery from their viral illness. So they were getting better from their chickenpox, their flu, their whatever,
Mhm,
and of course, the whole time, I'm sure mom's been giving them aspirin, and then it's like that 3 to 5 days later, that's when it hits.
mhm.
And that's when they start having symptoms of kind of going backwards and saying, "Okay, something's not right."
Well, the underlining, issue to having this, and that might also be like, a risk factor, is fatty acid oxidation.
Right.
And that's basically a very rare condition that affects like how your body breaks down fat. So I think nursing 101 pretty much tells you this. Like the more fat you have on your body, the longer chemicals, toxins, sometimes even certain foods take to break down and filter
Yeah.
out through your kidneys, your liver, your bladder, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
So if you are a person that has like this condition, and then on top of that, you're obese, I mean, you're setting yourself up for like catching this illness
Yeah. And I mean, we know that childhood obesity is worse now than it was back in the
ever,
yeah,
ever.
ever, but, so there's a couple of things that you would look out for: nausea and vomiting, children being very sleepy, lethargic. Those are the first signs of it. And then after that, it progresses. They can start becoming confused, they can have, like, altered mental status, becoming angry or being violent. That's a red flag for any parent if your child's not like that or doesn't have another condition that would cause that kind of behavior. Of course, the increase in irritability that will come along with that. And then it will even get to the point where the child will become unresponsive, can go into a coma, have seizures. And all of this is related to the two main issues, which are the fact that the brain is swelling and the fact that their liver is also essentially shutting down. I mean, it
Exactly.
affects all organs, but it really hones in um, on the brain and the liver.
So they consider it like 5 stages, right? Ashley pretty much described the first stage, um, leading up to the final stage with it, which is stage 5. And we're talking about, seizures, paralysis, respiratory arrest, and death. Um, we did mention, that you can be older and still catch the disease.
Yep.
Because, like I said, back in the day, which wasn't that far ago in
No, it
1980,
was not.
um, like I said, take two aspirin, call me in the morning. So
Yeah.
you still have adults that, that's embedded.
Mhm.
Tylenol, what? Like, that
Yeah.
take two aspirins and call me in the morning is like embedded. So
Yeah.
there are cases of adults catching, this syndrome, and they have symptoms too. They have the persistent or reoccurring vomiting. Their listlessness. They have personality changes. Maybe they're combative, but they usually aren't.
Mm.
They're irritable, but they usually aren't. Maybe they're disoriented more from their normal baseline. Delirium, convulsions, and sometimes people lose consciousness.
Yeah.
And that's when it leads to being intubated, and, more serious issues arise from that.
Absolutely. And you know, to it does take kind of a battery of tests when, especially because you're coming off of a viral illness. So I think a lot of people, they kind of tend to wait. And I'm, as a parent, I'm not rushing my kid to the doctor, if they start feeling better and then they get worse again. I'm just like, you might have just had a good day and your body's taking time to recover.
Yeah.
So it is something that you just have to be cognitive of, like, hey, this can really lead into a bad situation. And I say that because it's not just aspirin, it's like aspirin-based products like
Exactly.
Pepto-Bismol. And I can't believe it, but my child's school has Pepto-Bismol on the list of approved things to give their children. And this is
Really?
from primary, elementary, and I can't remember what the high school has. I think they have the same thing though. And it just really, I was like, I cannot believe it. And I've even had nurses call me and say, "Your child's here. They said their stomach's upset, and you don't have Pepto as something that can give them." I'm like, "No, because it's aspirin based, and kids aren't supposed to be taking it." First off, and secondly, if my child has an upset stomach to the point that he needs Pepto, he probably needs to be at home.
Yeah, he shouldn't be at school giving his whatever to other people.
You
But then
know?
parents really need to, like, know their children, because if you have a viral illness,
Yeah,
you're gonna have the nausea, the vomiting, you're gonna have, like, the lethargic, the sleepiness. Some of these, symptoms of this syndrome are just that of, like, a viral illness, like a
yeah,
cold, or,
exactly,
flu, chicken pox. You're gonna feel like that anyway. So you really
exactly,
have to, like, really know your children, and, like, really know, their behavior when they're ill, what their
exactly.
baseline is, so that
Yep.
you can be able to kind of like differentiate. My whole thing is, when in doubt, get en route to the doctor,
Mhm.
because some things are repairable and some things aren't.
Oh
And
yeah.
so the earlier you catch it, the better off you are. So, I mean, I think that's really important. And I think that's a really good lead into you telling us about, like, the diagnostics behind this. So I
Yeah.
think my kid has this. Now I'm in doubt. So now I'm en route. I'm going to the ER. What should I expect when I'm at the ER?
So you're going to have blood work. Of course, there's always blood work that is done. That's really going to look for your liver function.
Hmm.
Like we've said it like 4 or 5 times, this really does affect your liver. So you're going to have, elevated numbers for our nurses out there, AST, ALT. It's going to all be out of whack. Urine and stool samples. That's just going to be making sure that you don't have anything else, because there is a process of diagnosing something as we're also ruling out other stuff. You know,
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not exact.
it's
That's why
not.
we practice it.
Yes.
Practice
And
medicine.
you may need a liver biopsy to help diagnose, depending upon what's going on. An EEG, again, there's brain swelling, so they're going to be looking at your brain. They're going to be having, if there is swelling, they're going to be pressure monitoring that with cranial pressure testing, MRI that'll look at all, head to toe. They're going to be looking at all your organs to see how things are holding up because, although it affects the liver and the brain the most, it does affect all organs.
Absolutely.
If you get into a point where you're in a coma and you need to be intubated, obviously that's taking a toll on your respiratory system and your lungs. And then a spinal tap can be needed, and that, just gets uh, some pressures from the intracranial swelling that can happen. So there's a whole list of things that are done, and it's going to start with the easiest and less invasive, and it's going to work its way up. They're not going to run in there and do a spinal tap before they just do some regular lab work and an EEG. So it kind of works its way up there, and a lot of it with that is once they realize that this is Reye's syndrome, then you're going to go into supportive treatments and okay, this is the problem. What do we need to do to fix it? This is a problem. What do we need to do to fix it?
So Rye syndrome is usually always treated in the hospital. It's
Hmm.
very rare where you're going to find like, all the equipment that you need for a spinal tap, an MRI, a liver biopsy, and all that other stuff, and an urgent care. So I just
You
say go
not let
straight to
anybody
the
in urgent
emergency.
care give you a spinal tap. No, I
Heck
don't care.
no. Heck, if
Don't
you're a
ever.
nurse, you're going to be like, heck to the no. I don't think so. Not on me.
No.
That's what the first thing I'm going to say. Not on me.
I mean, there's some hospitals I wouldn't want giving me a spinal tap. Better yet, an urgent care. So
True. That's true. That's true. Not on me. But what they will do to treat is give you IV fluids, of course. They do that for anything. Sometimes that's the first thing they do when they pull you back, is
yeah.
start an IV on you.
Mhm.
They may give you diuretics to decrease that intracranial pressure, to lower your blood pressure because we're trying to get things back to like a homeostasis. I love that word. I just love it. They're just trying to bring things back to normal. And when you have this syndrome, and it's causing pressure, your blood pressure's out of whack too. So they're trying to get that in control to keep the swelling in your brain from continuing to swell. And they're going to give you medications to prevent bleeding. They're going to treat you sometimes with vitamin K, plasma, and platelets. They're going to give you cooling blankets. Like I said, we're trying to like drop everything. We're trying to drop your body temperature. We're trying to drop your blood pressure and just make everything, nice and normal. And if your child has trouble breathing or your adult has a trouble breathing, they might need to be intubated and on a ventilator. It just depends on how serious their syndrome was. If
And
they
this,
were having seizures or if they
yeah.
were unconscious, it just depends on the severity of your syndrome.
And it can be fatal. It has killed children before. It's not something that it's like, "Oh, well, it's a bad hospital stay." Like, no, this can lead to death. So, I have always avoided any aspirin and aspirin-based products. In the world of, medicine, and for my children, that is anything that says aspirin or aspirin in it. You have to be
Yeah.
cognitive of that because some of these medicines that have, multifunction have aspirin in it as a fever reducer. A lot of them don't anymore. Stuff that's specific for children shouldn't have it in there, but you need to read your ingredients. And then I don't give my kids Pepto. Sorry, you're just going to have to
I
have
don't
some
either.
of it. And I would think I've never even heard a doctor recommend for me to give my kids Pepto. I mean, I have a 15-year-old daughter and I'm still not giving her Pepto. I'm just like,
When I was growing
yeah,
up, it was like a big thing, but I think that also was from the aspirin generation too,
right.
Like nowadays, everybody's like, oh, give them Imodium or, drink fluids or, eat
Hmm.
brat diet. Like they really they really want you to get rid of whatever it is causing that illness. They
Right.
want you to get rid of it. So if you're taking medication that's going to stop you from, getting rid of your GI bug, like that's just prolonging you being sick. So
Yeah.
the doctor will tell you if you
Let
have
it
a
run
really
its
good
course.
doctor,
Yep.
they will tell you let it run its course. If you're
Mhm.
not any better in like 2 or 3 days, take some Imodium and come see us.
Right.
But they really want everything to run its course. And that's even true sometimes of fevers. I've heard doctors say, let the fever run its course. Don't give Tylenol or ibuprofen until it gets to this certain number.
Mhm.
And then I've heard other doctors say, pre-medicate before, they come in for vaccines, or before they do this or before they do that. So I think it's really important to, one, reach out to your pediatrician. Make sure you have that like open line of communication,
Mhm.
because every doctor is different and every day
Yeah.
there's new research that's coming out. But I think the most important thing that you said was exactly what I do. Read the instructions, read
Mhm.
the ingredients,
Yes.
because I can tell you that the flu and sinus plus medications are combination of medications. It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
just one thing.
No.
So it's meant to like stop your fever, help with your sore throat and congestion. So
Mm.
like it's going to have more than one thing in there. And if you are a person that has high blood pressure, a lot of the stuff that's in those over the counter medications you shouldn't be taking anyway. So
Right.
I think that's like the most important thing that you said, was to read your ingredients and to
Yeah,
like read the
absolutely.
instructions.
So, I think that pretty much sums up perfectly, the episode, that we've given, just to make sure that you're doing your due diligence, that you're talking with your pediatrician, your primary care doctor. You know, aspirin is not indicated really for children under the age of 18. I mean, and you really don't shouldn't be taking aspirin if you have a viral illness anyways. Take, acetaminophen or ibuprofen, your Tylenol, your Motrin, whatever the brand is that you prefer, just not aspirin. Just because you're not excluded the moment you turn 18 or 19 from having a problem. It doesn't, our bodies
Mhm.
don't work that way. So we just want to make sure that you keep that in mind. And we'll have everything linked that we found, our articles. I have the little 50-year update journal
Mhm.
of pediatrics. It's a very short and sweet article, but it was kind of interesting to read. And you visit our website, thenursingpostllc.com. You can subscribe there. You can shop our website as well. Rosa, do you have anything else to add?
Shop, 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 leave comments, feedback, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.